Coming up, what moves are left for the Nets to make this summer? Which players could be traded during the season? Where will the team finish? I'll answer all those fan questions and more after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And on today's show, it's Fan Take Friday. I took questions from listeners on a wide range of subjects, including the team's plan for next season, potential off-season and in-season moves, the new look locker room, and more. So let's get right into it, just hitting these in the order that they came in. First question, are you confident the Nets will be a bottom three team this year with CT, Cam Thomas in a prove-it year, new MPJ, and developing ball handlers in multiple roles compared to last year? And am I confident the Nets are going to be a bottom three team? I'm confident that they'll be in that range. I'm confident that they'll be worse than they were last season. I think they'll finish worse than they did last season. They finished with the sixth worst record in the league last year. And I think if you just look at the moves that they've made, last year and into this year, it does seem like there is a greater focus on youth, on player development, and in turn on draft position. I talked about this at length on previous pods, but going from Dennis Schroeder and D'Angelo Russell, particularly Schroeder in the beginning of the season last year when he was playing like one of the top point guards in the league, to all rookie ball handlers and rookie point guards and Yegor Diome, Nolan Traore, Ben Saraf, that is going to be a big drop-off. And then outside of that, this is a Nets team that was already at a severe, shot creation deficit last year. And you take away a guy like Schroeder who's proven that he can be, somewhat of a self-creator and a playmaker and an offensive engine, and then you replace him with rookie ball handlers, that's a big step back. There's obviously been a lot of debate about, is Cam Johnson that much better of a player than Michael Porter Jr.? The jury's still out on that, but I think I'm confident in saying that Cam Johnson is a superior ball handler, a superior self-creator in doing some of those things outside of just spot-up shooting. I think he's better than that, better at that than Michael Porter Jr. Now, MPJ didn't do a ton of that in Denver with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic dominating things. So could he get better at that and improve? We'll see. But I do think that Cam Johnson is a little bit of a step above MPJ in that regard. So the shot creation, I think, is just going to be at a severe deficit compared to what it was last year. Now you say, maybe we get a healthier Cam Thomas, and he only played 25 games last year. Maybe he plays 60 or 70 games this year. That improves the shot creation a lot, but still, I think there's not going to be as much structure around him with so many rookie guys handling the ball and initiating the offense. And if Cam does play, we've seen that he's going to give some things back on the other end because he has not been a good defender up to this point in his career. So I think that this roster and this team is clearly a lot younger, and in turn, I think is worse than it was when the Nets opened the year last year. And that was what put the Nets behind the eight ball. Was they started out 9-10. They really, after that, played like one of the worst teams in the league. And that was because the Nets took a lot of steps to trade away guys like Dennis Schroeder, like Dorian Finney-Smith, and handle some of those things. So I think that's going to be the situation from the jump. What we saw after those guys left, it's going to look more like it did after they were gone. And that's going to be straight out of the gate this season. And the schedule just released. If you look at the Nets' first 10, 20 games, you say how many wins you think they're going to get. I think it's going to be a much slower start this year than it was last year. So I do think that they will be in the range of a bottom three team. I think they'll be, more at the forefront of that tank race than they were at the beginning of the year last season. Next question, of the interviews and questions you've done with Nets players and staff over the years, what was the most interesting interaction and what was the most enjoyable? It's a really good question. I think I've talked to so many, I've been on the Nets beat for 3 seasons now. I've talked to so many players, so many coaches, so many people around the league during that span. If we're talking players, one that really stood out, getting to come in my first year and interview Kevin Durant and just speak to him almost on a daily basis, that was really great. And I'd say that he was one of the most interesting and enjoyable people that I talked to, regardless of what was going on off the court with the team, all the issues that you had. What I appreciated about KD is in a NBA where so many people, or just pro sports in general, where so many players are so media trained to the max, they don't want to let anything go. It's the most vanilla answers a lot of the time with so many guys. I felt like KD was very candid a lot of the time, and he said what was on his mind. And sometimes that maybe ruffled some feathers, and sometimes it just meant him getting really into the weeds of basketball. And I think regardless of what you think about KD, I think we all can agree that he's one of the biggest hoop heads that you're ever going to come across. And some of his answers were so honest and so insightful about what was going right, or a lot of the time what was going wrong. And he didn't mince words. So I thought that getting to, get a look into how his basketball mind worked, how he was viewing things, how I saw things on the court, and then did he see the same things? How much, more was he just seeing that I would obviously have no idea about? It was really interesting to hear him talk. I think Cam Johnson, another guy who, he's obviously gone now, but I think he was really insightful. He was really open with the media. He was always just great with access and always being there and always bringing in energy when we wanted to talk to him. Maybe there were a few moments where he didn't necessarily want to address some things, but for the most part, he was just a really great guy to talk to. And if we're talking coaches, I would say, one guy who hasn't been on the Nets staff since I've been on the beat, but Kenny Atkinson, a former Nets coach. I've gotten, a chance to speak one-on-one with Kenny, and then I got a chance to obviously talk to him before the Nets played the Cavaliers last season. And, a lot of coaches, it's a lot of coach speak in the NBA now. They don't want to give too much away. They're also media trained. And the times that I've gotten to speak with Kenny, I've asked him maybe just a simple question to start things off, and he will go on for 4 or 5 minutes giving you every detail he could possibly think about that. So he was really great to talk to. So of the players and coaches, those are the guys I would say, but there's so many, and there'll be so many more over the years. So I'm really looking forward to that. Next question. What's the best realistic asset the Nets can get with the remainder of their cap space? Doesn't seem like a lot is going on in the NBA this offseason. And that's a good question. The Nets are still the only team in the NBA with cap space. They have over $20 million left after doing their salary dumps from Michael Porter Jr. and Terrence Mann. So there could still be more moves to be made. At this juncture, I know that the Nets are still gauging, interest around the league and things they can do with their cap space. They're still making calls, but I wouldn't expect them to get a premium asset at this point in the offseason, because I think if there was a deal like that to be made, it would have been done already. I mean, you look at using their cap space, like what are the types of moves that they're looking to do? It would obviously be salary dumps and accumulating more draft capital. And at this point, is there going to be a move where they can get a first round pick or anything significant? Probably not. Like you look at the teams that are still trying to shed salary. Like the Boston Celtics are one of those teams. They just executed a salary dump with the Utah Jazz. They traded George Niang there and gave the Jazz a couple second round picks. Like the Nets could have been on that, but it didn't seem like they really thought that was worth their while. So could there be more moves to be made? The Celtics are reportedly, still gauging interest in Anthony Simons. They could look to dump him to get even more breathing room below the luxury tax from the second apron and first apron. So could that be a potential move? Maybe, but are they going to give up a first round pick or anything significant to do that? It doesn't seem like it, or at least not right now. Maybe as the season progresses, but I wouldn't bet on it. I think, the Nets have the remainder of their cap space. They could do something. They could hold that cap space into the offseason, because we see sometimes at the trade deadline, teams are trying to get off money and trying to do things that they weren't doing before, because situations change where teams are at in the standings versus where they expected to be. That always changes midway through the year. So the Nets don't have to use all of that cap space going into the season. So they could look to, hold on to some of it and then just spend to get up to the minimum. That could mean re-signing Cam Thomas into that cap space. They could also re-sign Day'Ron Sharpe and Zaire Williams with that cap space, as opposed to using the room exception for one of those guys. So we'll see, but I wouldn't bank on the Nets getting any kind of premium asset at this point in the offseason using their cap space. We got a lot more questions from listeners on a wide range of subjects, including the Nets roster, including potential moves that could be made in season and more. So we'll get to all those after a quick break. But before that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Guys, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Guys, you have all the accounts, you have all the subscriptions that you use, whether it's Netflix, whether it's other things that you're paying for monthly. You can link all your accounts to Monarch and immediately spot subscriptions that you aren't even using. Canceling those alone can save you money every month. Monarch makes it simple to review your finances with your partner. You can both see your budget, goals, and spending activity in one place. Guys, don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, this Fan Take Friday, rolling through more questions and takes I got from all of you listeners. Next question, pull back the curtains and tell us what it's like to be a beat reporter / podcast host. What does a day look like for you? Really good question there. So a regular day, we'll say during the regular season, and I'm obviously new to the Locked On Network, and I'm going to be doing a lot more podcasting content during the season. It's a daily pod. So during the season, it's Monday through Friday. So that's a lot of volume. But during the year, it's going to the games, obviously, every day, going to the practice, just being around the team as much as possible as a beat reporter, as opposed to like a columnist or something where you're giving opinions more of the time. A beat reporter, or opinions in your writing, a beat reporter, you need to know everything that's going on with the team at all times, or at least that's the goal. That's the standard that you strive for. So on the beat reporting aspect of it, I'm going to games, I'm going to practices, I'm getting to games hours early. It's just talking to people around the arena, constantly around the practice facility, trying to get to know everybody and get the best sense of what's going on the court and in the locker room. And it's a lot of work. It's obviously a lot of writing. I do a ton of volume on clutchpoints.com, writing multiple articles every day during the season, but it's also outside of that, just talking to people and trying to build relationships and trying to know everything about what's going on with the team. So that takes up a lot of your time. And now with the podcast angle, doing a daily pod, it's also just networking, not just with people around the team and all those things, but also people around the league, potential guests, potential different angles that you can bring to the show, and you'll get a lot of interesting different people on. So during the year, we're going to have a ton of more guests on the pod, a ton of different people who can talk about a ton of different angles surrounding the Nets. So that'll be really fun, but it's a lot of that. It's a lot of brainstorming, what goes into the show, how you're going to line up the topics and the segments every day and every week. So it's a lot. There's a lot going on from a lot of different angles, but at the end of the day, you get to write about basketball, you get to talk about basketball, you get to watch basketball for a living. So I really wouldn't have it any other way. And it's really an awesome job. And, having these jobs has been a dream come true for me. And I want to thank all of you guys for following, because that's what gives me the ability, is you guys consuming this, you guys reading the articles, you guys watching and listening to the podcast. It makes it so there's a demand and that I'm able to do this stuff. So I'm really appreciative to you for that. Next question. Do you think Michael Porter Jr. will be a trade candidate this season? Seems like the Nets may have acquired him with the idea of flipping him later on for value. Could MPJ be a trade candidate this season? It's not out of the realm of possibilities, but I don't think it's the most likely scenario. I think if the Nets are looking to flip him, I think it's more likely that it would be, when his contract is expiring the following season. I think that it would be a little bit more movable, and there'd be a little bit more interest in that. And even then, it might be difficult because he's making close to $40 million. But if MPJ really starts showing things that he hasn't shown before, if he rehabilitates his value to a place where a team thinks it's worth it, maybe they could do it. But the scenario where I see MPJ being traded from the Nets would be if it was either a team trying to clear cap space in a salary dump. So I think that would probably be more the case next, or the season after this coming season when he's an expiring contract, or if it's a trade for a star, say Giannis or whoever comes on the trade block, the Nets throw their hand in the ring. You have $40 million in matching salary there right off the bat. You have a player who might be interesting to a team like the Bucks, or who you ever want to say. So in that scenario, I could see MPJ being traded this season. But the salary dump scenario, or maybe even a team just taking him, not in a star deal, but liking him and wanting to take him on, I think that would be more when he's an expiring contract after this coming season in 2026-27. Next question. If the Nets fail to get a top 4 pick and see rough but expected year from their rookies, can you see Sean Marks trading for our 27 swap back? Would he trade the 2032 Denver pick for the 2027 swap? You know, I don't really see that, trading that 2032 Denver pick. That's the best draft pick that the Nets have right now in terms of trade value. That was a prized asset that they got back in that Cam Johnson trade, obviously. And would they trade that to get their swap back? I definitely don't think so. Could they look to trade other things to get their swap back? Definitely. I mean, they have 9 tradable first-round picks right now. They have young prospects. They have a lot of things they could try to trade with the Rockets to get that swap back. But I would say the Nets tanked last season. They're heading for another tank season this year. I really think that they're going to want to take a step towards contention next year. And that might be through the draft with their guys developing into their sophomore year in that 2026-27 season. That could be whoever they get in the draft this coming year, giving them a big boost as a rookie. That could be moves that they look to make outside of that if a star becomes available. I just don't think that the Nets want to go through 3 straight years of tanking and losing. Now, it's going to be the first year that they're looking probably to take a step back towards being competitive. So in that first season, they could still be bad. So they could still want to get that pick back. So they definitely could try to get that pick back, because even if they make an improvement, that pick could still be a late lottery pick. So we'll see. Do I think they would trade that 2032 Denver first for it? I don't. But I could see them maybe trying to trade other things to get that swap back. But if it's looking like they're going to be a bad team again, it's going to take a lot, obviously, to get that back from Houston. So we'll see. But I do think that the Nets are definitely going to be trying to make somewhat of a substantial improvement during that 2026-27 season. So that could obviously influence their urgency to get that swap back. Last question before another break. What players do you think have the most realistic chance of being traded during this season? I just touched on MPJ. I don't think he's the most realistic. If I had to say the most realistic to be moved this year, I'd probably say Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton. Those are the 2 guys that I could see, because Nick Claxton, I think that his contract is not going to be an extremely difficult contract to move, with it being descending into its final 2 years. Now, I think it could have better value during those final 2 years because it's easier to match in terms of salary, and also it'll just be more attractive because he's at a lower number. But Nick said that he was playing hurt for much of last season. He said he hurt his back last offseason. That kind of lingered throughout the whole year. And he said at his exit interview that he was going to use this summer to get right. So if he gets right physically and he looks great coming out of the gate, and he looks like he has a more explosiveness, has regained the motor that he had during that Defensive Player of the Year potential season, could he have more value, and could they move on from him during the season? I think they definitely could, because I talked about this on a recent episode with Lucas Kaplan, and you look at their roster, they have Day'Ron Sharpe waiting in the wings. They just obviously drafted Danny Wolf. They're a roster that is trending more towards youth, obviously. They brought in 4 19-year-olds and 1 21-year-old in the draft. They have other young guys, Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead. They're going to get younger through this coming draft in 2026. Nick Claxton's going to be 27 during the season. So does he not fit the timeline? Not necessarily. He's young enough to be a part of it, but is he going to be a part of the long-term future of the team? I think the jury is very much out on that, just because the timeline, it has been reset so much. So we'll see if there's a team that's needy for a center, if somebody suffers an injury, or there's just a team that needs someone in the middle and Nick Claxton is playing well. I definitely think that he'd be a trade candidate. And then Cam Thomas, for obvious reasons. I'm not going to get fully into it again, but I've outlined the reasons that it doesn't seem like he's a part of the Nets' future plans. Or a definite part of the Nets' future plan. So whether they sign him to a short-term contract or whether he signs that qualifying offer, I think he could definitely be somebody who could potentially be on the trade block, especially if he signs that qualifying offer. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent during the coming offseason. So at that point, it's pretty much a signal that he's going to be gone. So the Nets would be looking probably to trade him for whatever they could get for him, but they might not be able to get anything. And also he'll have trade veto rights if he signs the qualifying offer. So he'd have to sign off on any deal. So that would limit the Nets' leverage, but maybe they could find a deal that they like and that he likes if he signs that, and they could swing something that way. But we'll see. Got a few more questions about some potential roster moves, some potential locker room things. I'll touch on all that and more when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode on this Fan Take Friday. Have a few more takes and questions I got from you listeners, so rolling right through. Any ideas on last-minute trades / signings to get to the minimum limit for the 2026 season? Minimum limit, I'm assuming you're talking about spending the Nets' remaining salary cap space. I touched on this briefly before, but I don't really think that like there's a significant trade where they're getting like a significant salary dump trade where they're getting a premium asset or anything along those lines. Now, could they swing a trade where they get multiple second round picks or something like that? Maybe they get a player that they feel like they could rehabilitate value, whether it's an Anthony Simons or someone like that. I think that could potentially be in, the cards. Last minute free agent signings. I don't think the Nets are really in the market for a free agent signing at this point because they're already at, if you include Cam Thomas, they're at, I think, 18 standard contracts. They're only allowed to carry 15 during the season. So there isn't really any more room at training camp to bring in more players. And also, they just don't really have any incentive to try to improve through the free agent market right now and spend more money. So using up the remaining cap space, I think the most likely way that that's going to happen is from the Nets free agent signings, incumbent guys, whether it's Zaire Williams, Day'Ron Sharpe, Cam Thomas. They have all those guys. They can sign them with, in Cam's case, they can exceed the cap to sign him. So they can go over the cap to sign him. With Zaire and Day'Ron, they can sign them into cap space, or they can use the room exception, which allows them to exceed the cap to sign one of them. That's $8 million, that exception. Both those guys signed $6 million contracts. So with one of Day'Ron or Zaire and with Cam Thomas, they can exceed the cap, or they can just sign those guys in the cap space and not exceed the cap at all. And right now, I'd say that's probably the likeliest scenario because Nets are in a position where if there isn't a salary dump of their liking, there really is no reason to bring in extra money on the payroll and then exceed the cap and add money to the payroll when you're just not trying to be good this year. So I think it would make the most sense for them to sign those guys using cap space, and that'll be how they get up to that minimum limit. Next question, are Terrence Mann, Michael Porter Jr., and Nick Claxton enough as far as veteran leadership goes, especially at point guard? Who do Dioman and Shorey look to for advice, good habits, all the rookie learning curve things? It's an interesting question, and I don't really know. I mean, Terrence Mann, I've talked to him. He said that he's excited to step into a leadership role. He's obviously the only oldest guy on the team. That's a new position for him, though. He's only 28 years old. He's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but he is the oldest player on this team, which just speaks to how young the roster is. He said that he's excited to take on that role. He seems like a great player. I've only heard good things about him from around the league. So he should help in that regard. Michael Porter Jr., obviously a really interesting guy. He's had a lot of really interesting things to say this offseason, but do I think that, while some people might be critical about some of the things that he's been saying, do I think that he's like a bad guy by any stretch? No. Like I talked to people who covered him in Denver, and they say that he's a great guy to talk to. They say he always has a good attitude. So we'll see. I mean, and then Nick Claxton, obviously, it's kind of weird that he's a veteran at this point, but he really is going into his 7th season. So are they enough as far as veteran leadership goes? I think it's probably a step down from what the Nets started the year at last year with Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, guys who've really been around the league and done it. And especially a guy like Cam Johnson, who emerged as a really respected voice in the locker room last year. But we'll see. I mean, I think Terrence Mann, Michael Porter Jr., Clax, they might be able to take up that mantle. And I definitely think that they'll at least try. So we'll see. But from the point guard perspective with Dioman and Shore, it is interesting because there is no veteran point guard on this team. So a lot of that player development, a lot of those things, it's how to be a pro, all the things that you learn, it's going to come from the coaching staff. But I will say, from talking with Dioman, talking with Shore, all the other Nets rookies, they really seem like they have good heads on their shoulders and they're ready to be about the right things. Last take. This isn't a question, but a good segment will be to do power rankings on the Flatbush 5 as the season progresses. Flatbush 5, I'm assuming you're talking about the Nets 5 rookie first-round picks. I haven't heard that yet, that nickname. Maybe I need to be in the Twitter sphere more and, just keep my eye out. But that is great. And, I'm definitely going to be keeping tabs, obviously, on how all these rookies are developing, who's looked good, who hasn't looked good. So naturally, there's just going to be a lot of coverage, a lot of following. I think fans, in addition, the two main focuses are going to be draft position and also player development. And that player development mostly is going to be about these rookie guys. So I'll definitely be keeping tabs on all of those guys. And that would be interesting to do power rankings of who's playing the best throughout the year. So maybe something that I'll think about. But That's all the questions, all the takes we have on this Fan Take Friday. Thank you to all of you who took the time to submit questions or takes. I really appreciate it. But that does it for this episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about any of these questions. Let me know what you think about the Nets roster, potential moves, who you think could be trade candidates this season, all of it. We got a lot more to talk about. I'm rolling on through August, so I'll be back on Monday talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.